All right, everyone. Welcome back to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. Today is actually going to be a short day, I'm pretty sure. Yesterday was a really long day, so I think it's better that today's going to be a short day. We are on day 13 of our reading plan, our 1 year chronological Bible online reading plan. And so this is day 13 of our plan, and it is only on Genesis chapter 36. So we also have a little bit from First Chronicles 1:35 through 2:2, but it's just a very small chapter. And most of this is a genealogy. And so it is not a massive amount of information, but I think genealogies are really good. I actually do get excited by genealogies because there are names and things in there that repeat over and over again. And there's some historical context I think that we can go back and we can learn things from. So in saying this, sort of to jump right in, yesterday we were on day 12, which was a little bit earlier in Genesis, and this was where Rachel died, was at the end. And so Jacob has returned to Bethel, and he had his he had just had his 12th child. So he had just had Benjamin, and then his wife passed away and they buried her. And so if we move on, they're going to give us, the writer, which again I believe is Moses, is going to give us an account of Esau, which is Jacob's brother, and his descendants and where he lives. So there are a couple things that I find interesting in this chapter. And verse 1 is the first one. So verse 1, it says, "This is the account of the family line of Esau, that is Edom." And so what we know is he is duly named, which there's a lot of people that seem to have two names. Jacob is one of them. It's Jacob and Israel. But God has renamed him. And in this one, Esau is also Edom. If you remember, that means red because he had this red stew. And so he winds up coming to this place, and they wind up calling it Edom, and his people become the Edomites because he is the leader of people. And so we start off with some of the people that were born to him, going to verse 6. So this is what I found really interesting. In verse 6, it says, and I'm going to read a little chunk. It says, Esau took his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. And what we saw just yesterday was that it looked like they actually did not live together. And so what I'm wondering is if that's a misunderstanding of what we thought was the scripture. If there's a possibility that he went to Succoth and then he went to essentially Canaan afterwards, and they had lived together for a while in that area before Esau then moved more south and went to Mount Seir. So it seems like in this area that it is telling us that they did spend some time together, but much like what we saw earlier, their possessions were too great for them to remain together. And that is why they parted from each other. So they didn't part as enemies. They didn't part as Jacob doing something underhanded to Esau, like telling him one thing and then doing another, but they parted because they had too much stuff for the small area. And if you remember, this also happened with Abraham and Lot. And so if we go back a few generations, Abraham and Lot were living together for a while, and then they both had such wealth and accumulated so many animals and things and land and area and people that worked on their land that they needed to separate because they were starting to quarrel. It doesn't say they were starting to quarrel here, but it was just too much. And so they moved on from each other. So Edom settled in the land of Seir, and then it looks like we'll find out what happened to Jacob after that. So when we go to verse 9, it does say that he's the father of the Edomites. So it says in verse 9, this is the account of the family line of Esau, the father of the Edomites, right? So we're starting a people group in the hill country of Seir, which unfortunately I'm probably consistently saying wrong. So some of the other things I note in here is verse 15. So it looks like Esau's sons were also chiefs. And so they had a different role as if they were leaders as well as just the sons of Esau. And so we also see that in the original people that lived in there. So when we go to verse 20 in this same, it's still in 36. So if we go to verse 20 and 36, it says, these were the sons of Seir the Horite, who was living in the region. So these are actually the people that were originally living in the region. And the Horites we originally see way back in Genesis. And so I want to kind of pop back into that area. Genesis 14:6. And so in 14:6, it's this area where we have it's Abraham. So again, we're going back just a couple of generations, and we have these areas where there's a 5 kings versus 4 kings, and then this is where Lot gets taken, and then Abraham goes and saves Lot. And so the Horites were people who were under the Chedorlaomer, who was one of the kings, and he had other kings with him, and he had 3 kings. So he was a king, and then there were 3 other kings with him, and then these 5 kings underneath rebelled, and they sort of warred up against the 4 kings. And at that time, the 4 kings kind of traveled on, and they defeated several people groups. And one of the people groups that they defeated were the Horites. And so if we see in 14, verse 5, I'm going to go to, in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites in Shava Kiriathim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran near the desert. So we see them at one point, they have been defeated by these kings. So this isn't our first showing of these people. So what we do know is that this area was not created by Esau, but Esau came and lived in this area. And what we're going to see is that they actually combined with each other. One of the things that I just want to note in it is that these are foreigners. These are not people of the promise. These are not people that that are in the family of Abraham. And so these are people that live outside of the family of Abraham. So Esau is connecting himself with people that are not his homeland people, or the people that Isaac and Rebekah would want him to make commitments with. And yet we see that he does do that. So one of the things that I also noted in here was in verse 20, we see what I guess we would call a character. We see Lotan or Lotan. He's one of the sons of the Horites. And then this son has a sister named Timnah. And what we see with Timnah, who was one of the Horites, is she is also, if we go back in verse 12, she is Esau's son Eliphaz's concubine. And so so here we go. Now we're intermarrying with foreign people. So Timnah is a concubine and creates a son of Esau's people. And so she becomes one of their families. So she's a Horite as well as now one of the Edomites. And then in verse 40, what I also want to note, and I find it interesting, I'm not 100% sure if it's the same person. I'm not sure why it wouldn't be, but it says these were the chiefs descended from Esau by name, according to their clans and regions. And the first person that is named is Timnah. So is this a different Timnah? Is this the same as the concubine and the sister of Lotan? So is she the same person, and is she then a chief? It's just a question. I'm not 100% sure, but it would certainly be interesting to know that there was a female chief then, because obviously what we hear all the time is that women were not really put in a place of high regard. And so maybe she was, even though, to be fair, these were not the Israelite people. These were people that were outside of the promise at the time. But I also thought it was just interesting to note these things. So what we find then is that we see all the descendants of this area, and the chiefs of Edom, descendants of Israel. And then we finish with right now the sons of Israel, who is Jacob. And this is the 12 sons that he has: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And so we will see what happens with them coming up tomorrow. If you guys like this, make sure you hit like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe, which will push it out to more people. And then you will keep getting the content every single day. And so I'll deliver more content tomorrow.